These men are angry. Well, they're not so much angry as fed up. Well, not even fed up, really. What these men are is grumpy.
Instant, you walk out your front door, you see something that annoys you.
School plays are universally and uniformly shite.
They call me Victor Meldrew. My band call me Victor Meldrew. My kids call me Victor Meldrew. I think when my hair finally falls out, I probably am Victor Meldrew.
Death penalty. It has to be public and it has to be a beheading. Men over 30 with ponytails.
I hate the phrase traffic calming.
People don't believe you when I say I am not Bob Harris. I never did the whistle test.
Turn the music down!
The 35 to 54-year-old group of men is the grumpiest of any in Britain today. Grumpier than their parents, who survived the war and felt lucky to draw their pensions. Grumpier than their children, who seem perfectly happy doing a lot of drugs and spending all night on the internet.
Who wants to surf on the net?
Am I computer literate? You've got to be out of your mind.
IKEA.
Jesus, it comes in a handy flat pack. Dear God.
Today's generation of grumpy old men grew up in a world they believed was getting better. Love and peace, tolerance and freedom. The world would be a nicer place. Instead, their legacy to their children is global warming, political non-entities, killing dark-skinned strangers in far-off lands, and Rupert Murdoch. These men are grumpy because the drug-induced dreams of the 60s have turned to dust.
When I was a child, there was a sense that the world was improving, that somehow everything was going to get better, that there would be world peace, there would be no hunger, that people would live in fraternity and sorority and happiness. There was a sense of optimism, and yet, of course, you grow up and it turns out to be just as crap as it always has been for every other generation.
We like to think that things would get better. We don't feel they have in lots of areas.
I'm an extremely grumpy person, whether or not it's just because I'm a sour bastard or whether it's because I fit some demographic trend, I'm not entirely certain. In fact, the very suggestion that my grumpiness may not be entirely my own tends to put me in a bit of a grump.
I put on this sort of thing on telly that I'm sort of like Mr. Nicey-Nicey, but I'm just always, you know, grumbling about something, but I think it just keeps me happy.
But grumpy old men know they can't continually go around saying how things were so much better when they were young. So they've ended up just being quietly grumpy about, well, everything. And that's what this series is about, all the things that hack them off. They're grumpy about mobile phones they can never get away from, about people who wear designer labels on the outside of their clothes. They're grumpy about traffic calming that may calm the traffic, but make them want to drill out their own brains in frustration. They're grumpy because they don't know if they're allowed to open doors for women, or to look at their breasts, even when they're obviously on show. They're grumpy about tattoos and about body piercing. They're grumpy about the trains and the abuse of everyday language, and they're all grumpy about automated call centres. And do our grumpy old men get phoned up at home while eating dinner by double-glazing salesmen?
I do, and I tell them to off.
People try to put us to down.
This was the generation that hoped to die before it got old, and has instead found itself old and not dead. Instead, they are increasingly out of step with the world around them. At school, they saw films showing how computers and hovercraft and vitamin drinks would make their lives relaxed and carefree.
It won't overheat.
Nuclear power would bring electricity too cheap to meter. They were encouraged to dream, but the dreams they dared to dream just did not come true.
You know, I remember the 60s. I was a child in the 60s, and I remember golden promises sort of echoing in my ears as I went to bed. I mean, you know, I'd watch Tomorrow's World with Raymond Baxter.
Another example of the way in which the world will shrink.
And Raymond promised me that in the future, I'd live for free, I wouldn't have to pay my electricity bills because that would come free, and that I could fly to America as a young, thrusting businessman in 60 minutes. And he lied.
The emphasis was always on technology and monorails and being beamed up, you know, to the Starship Enterprise. And now we do have those sort of, you know, intergalactic communicators, of course, but you just stand in Tesco's and ring home and say, they haven't got shredded wheat, will Sugar Puffs do instead?
Yes, what do you want?
Today, this is the group least likely to believe that our leaders know best, or that the NHS works, or that technology will improve our lives.
The idea we'd all be going around in jetpacks and eating our dinner with a pill and live to be 900, and that the planet was conquered and soon space would be. But even the alternative visions, the kind of 60s countercultural visions, were also exceedingly utopian. Wall-to-wall free love, raffia work of naked limbs heaving in orgasmic delight, no need for a government, peace and love, man, stoned out of your gourd, artificial paradise, fantastic tickety-boo.
Part of it is just about getting old, finding themselves shouting at top of the pops because they just can't write good songs anymore, or telling their kids to turn that bloody racket down just like their dads. And it's all so much worse because the last thing they expected was to end up talking to their kids just like their dad talked to them.
I'll tell you how I knew I was getting old the other day. This is with my daughter shopping. The great thing of shopping with a daughter is you go to all these girls' clothes shops that you wouldn't normally wander into, all the loud music, but you get to see all these girls sort of wiggling in and out. You can see them trying on. And how do I look in this? Oh, she look fabulous. I wasn't talking to you. Oh, sorry. You know, and I was looking at all these thinking, this music is getting on my nerves. You know, and I went to the cashier and said, yes, right. He said, ah? I said, we're going to have music. Sorry? I said, turn the music down! He said, and I thought, this is a milestone in my life. I'm old now because I am in a girls' clothes shop, the place I want to be, complaining about the music. You know, that is, you know, I've crossed over the line now.
We thought this wouldn't happen to us. It happened to our parents because they were staid and boring. But this couldn't happen to us because we were the generation that discovered rock and roll, an experience no one had ever had before, or, so we believed, anyone could ever have again.
It's only because I'm exactly the right age to have had my life transformed by hearing Elvis Presley that, so there's, you know, nobody else has kind of had that experience. So nobody can have their life transformed in quite that way again. They can be excited by something they've heard. They've grown up with the tradition of popular music, and it's impossible to convey to people what it was like hearing Heartbreak Hotel coming out of a radio.
Our grumpy old men were brought up to believe that women were mysterious creatures to be cherished. You opened doors for them, gave up your seat on crowded trains. The ideal family had father at its head, who would come home from work to the smell of homemade cooking and find that Mum had spent the day boiling up the Sunday leftovers to make delicious soup for him and his 2 delightful children. Then came women's lib, and the rules of engagement changed forever. Wanting to be the breadwinner became oppressive. Opening doors or giving up your seat became patronizing. No matter how little clothing women wore, men had to pretend not to notice. Today, modern women compete to show off as much flesh as possible, and our grumpy old men don't know if they're allowed to look or not.
It is difficult to know where to look. You know, when people have got kind of rather obvious breasts pointing at you and you're talking to them, and you feel yourself kind of drawn and trying not to look at them in a rather deliberate way and staring into the middle distance.
When I was a young boy and there's a pretty girl walking past, you know, you tended to sort of stop and, you know, just look round and see, you know, oh, she's looking. You know. But when you get to my age, you have to look at like this. They said, "You got a problem, mate?" "Yeah, I'm mentally undressing you."
They looked around and said, "What are you looking at?" I'd say, "Your tits, you know, or your legs, or, you know, you've got a beautiful bottom or whatever," and that's it, you know.
However, so grumpy are our grumpy old men that even half-dressed young women don't necessarily make them happy.
What I find amusing is when a woman is wearing one of those short tops that exposes the stomach, and she's got like a beer gut, I suppose is the only word for it, you know, as if you're not going to notice, you know, because it's like a woman wearing it, you know. Because like, if you're going to wear one of those tops which finishes like halfway up and exposing your stomach, you just have to have a flat stomach. So I find that, like, I want to say, you've got a beer gut, you should take that off, you know. The other thing I find, I suppose, is the very low-slung jeans combined with the thong. You see, like, a woman's thong. You can tell that she's wearing a thong. Like, it's like the sort of like new female equivalent of Builder's bum. Because you can actually see down to the start of the crack of her arse. And you're thinking, I don't want to see that. And the thong is actually not even like, you know, if she's got a thong on, it'd be quite nice if it was actually like in place, but sometimes the thong bit is off to the side. And you're watching this and you're walking along and you're thinking, I'm actually turned into a perv, though I don't want to be.
Things may come and thongs may go, but one fashion gets right up the noses of all our grumpy old men without exception.
Piercing. I cannot abide piercing. Oh, God. I mean, one little tiny stud through the nose, maybe. But girls who have rows and rows of rings and things through their tongue, I mean, that must be so unpleasant. It all comes from some Indian god, apparently. The Indian god of pissing your parents off. This is what this was all about. And it goes way back in history that an Indian god really wanted to annoy her middle-class parents, so she had her tongue pierced and her nose pierced and her eyebrow pierced and all her ears. And I find it very hard to hold a conversation with someone who's got various bits of metal hanging off them.
To me, particularly a woman with a nose stud there, you know, those little nose studs, it looks like she's got a spot. Just looks like a zit, you know, a slightly exotic zit.
Body piercing is the most disgusting, horrendously horrible thing that I've ever seen in my entire life. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. I actually knew a girl who pierced her navel and got it stuck on the chain on the